Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of powdered wigs, golden chandeliers, and believe it or not, chamber pots tucked behind velvet drapes. You're standing inside the Palace of Versailles, a vision of opulence where the walls gleam with mirrors and the floors whisper with the brush of silk slippers. The scent of roses might tickle your nose, but don't breathe too deeply. Underneath the perfume lurks the pungent truth of court life. That's right, tonight we're peeling back the satin curtain to reveal what hygiene was really like at the court of Versailles. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this one with your appetite intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment telling me your city and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear the crunch of gravel under a carriage wheel. The year is 1682, and Louis XIV, Sun King, has officially moved his court to the sprawling Palace of Versailles. You arrive just behind a noblewoman, adjusting the folds of her brocade gown. Inside the palace, everything gleams. It's almost too much gold leaf climbing up cornices, frescoes, sprawling across ceilings, crystal chandeliers so numerous they seem to multiply in the mirrored halls. You half expect cleanliness to match the grandeur. But within hours, you realize something is off. A footman passes with a faint trail of sweat and powder in his wake. You catch the unmistakable whiff of rot. You turn. A young marquis in crimson breeches coughs into his lace handkerchief, then slips it into his pocket. That handkerchief will remain unwashed for weeks. Inside Versailles, water is viewed with suspicion. Physicians still believe that bathing too often can open the pores to disease. The idea of scrubbing down with water is reserved for the poor or the insane. Among courtiers, cleanliness is not about soap. It's about scent. And so they layer perfume upon perfume, trying to mask what inevitably seeps through the human body. You walk past Madame de Maintenon, who nods politely. She smells of ambergris and orange blossom. But if you linger too long, the illusion breaks. Even she, one of the king's closest confidants, cannot escape the damp odor beneath the musk. A cloying mix of sweat, mildew, and old wool. There are no bathrooms here as you know them. There are chamber pots, certainly. Some guests even relieve themselves in the corner of the hallway when urgency strikes. A well-placed curtain or folding screen is enough to grant a moment's privacy. And what of toilets? There are commodes scattered about, essentially fancy wooden boxes with holes and a drawer beneath. But flushing, plumbing, sanitation, not at Versailles. At night, the palace staff empties chamber pots into large vats. Servants drag them away, splashing as they go. The scent wafts through the halls, mixing with candle smoke and roasted meats from the kitchen. The court may dine on ortolans and pheasant, but even a royal feast can't mask the stink of thousands of bodies and barely managed waste. You glance down the hall of mirrors. A visiting duchess adjusts her towering wig, which is powdered thickly with flour. The white powder hides lice. In fact, everyone here is infested. Even Louis XIV himself suffers from a scalp rash made worse by the layers of pomade and powder packed into his hairpieces. Underneath all that regality, his skin itches constantly. And yet wigs are essential. To appear at court without one would be scandalous. Cleanliness of the scalp is managed with combs and lavender oil, not with washing. And because wigs are reused, reshaped, and rarely cleaned, the lice population in Versailles thrives. Some courtiers sleep in hair coverings to keep the parasites at bay. Others simply learn to live with the constant itching. Now look to your left. The Queen's bedchamber. It is here in full view of gathered nobles that Marie-Thérèse must give birth. This is no private moment. Childbirth is a public event, a performance for the court. The room is ornate ceremonial, but not sterile. A midwife works by candlelight. Sheets are reused. Instruments are wiped perhaps with linen, but not boiled. The risks of infection are immense, but no one questions the system. After all, the court is not meant to be practical. It is meant to awe. Even the cleaning routines are more theatrical than effective. Once a week, the parquet floors are wiped with vinegar and rosewater. Not scrubbed, just wiped. Dust accumulates in corners. Rodents drawn by crumbs and waste scurry beneath furniture. The palace cats are too pampered to hunt. They doze on velvet cushions, leaving mice to explore at will. Your shoes stick slightly as you walk. The polish from the marble floors mingles with grease from torches and soot from fireplaces. No one truly expects the palace to be clean, only beautiful. You step outside into the gardens. A breeze offers relief, but it carries something sharp. You follow your nose to the orangerie, where overripe fruit has fallen and rotted in the sun. A gardener passes with a cart of manure for the roses. Everything is lush grand and tinged with decay. You notice a gentleman relieve himself behind a hedge. No shame. The gardens are vast, and Versailles has no true public restrooms. Servants carry scented handkerchiefs and vinegar-soaked sponges to wave away the odor. You feel disoriented. The beauty here is overwhelming, but it's a mask. Behind the silk gold and powder lies a reality few ever mention. Versailles stinks, and everyone pretends not to notice. Yet no one dares question the system. To complain is to appear uncouth, even vulgar. Better to smile through the stench, douse yourself in musk, and maintain appearances. Because hygiene at Versailles is not about health. It's about illusion. And so you keep walking. Past a marble statue stained with mildew. Past a hall where the floorboards creak with trapped moisture. Past another nobleman scratching discreetly beneath his lace cuffs. You realize that Versailles is not just a palace, it's a theater, and the play is always in motion. You can't wash away the truth, only perfume it. You continue down the gallery as your eyes adjust to the flickering glow of candlelight. Versailles, though bathed in sunlight by day, becomes a different world after dusk. The shadows stretch long across the parquet floors, and the chandeliers cast distorted reflections that shimmer across the mirrored walls. But with nightfall comes a deeper awareness of the palace's secrets, its rituals, its rot, and the bizarre pageantry of courtly hygiene. A servant hurries by, holding what looks like a decorative porcelain bowl. But it's not for soup. It's a bourdalouet, a small, curved chamber pot designed for noblewomen to discreetly urinate during long court events. Some are made of fine china, others are silver. But their purpose is the same quiet, convenient relief under petticoats and panniers without needing to leave the room. You marvel at the ingenuity and wince at the thought of accidental spillage on the silk-upholstered furniture. No one mentions it aloud, but the smell of these makeshift solutions lingers. The ornate carpets and drapes are never fully aired. They trap every odor from unwashed skin to spilled wine to the sour tang of bodily fluids. Yet even this is part of Versailles' strange normal. The nobility simply endures it. It is the price of being seen. You pass the king's grand apartment, where preparations for the lever or royal awakening are already underway. The Sun King's day begins not with privacy, but with ceremony. At the stroke of 8, nobles crowd into his chamber to witness him rise from bed. Each gesture, receiving his wig, sipping broth, donning his shoes, is choreographed, observed, and participated in by dozens. And nowhere in this ritual is there mention of a bath. Instead, the king is freshened each morning. His face is dabbed with linen soaked in spirits. His hands are wiped, not washed. A dash of scented water on the wrists. A light powdering. The illusion of cleanliness is restored, but his skin rarely sees soap. In fact, Louis XIV is rumored to have bathed only twice in his life. Once upon doctor's orders, once as penance. Soap itself is a luxury made of animal fat and lye often harsh on the skin. But worse than its abrasiveness is the fear it incites. Many believe water and scrubbing could drive illness inward. A bath might unbalance the humors. So instead, cleanliness is pursued with gloves, perfume, and layered clothing meant to soak up sweat until it can be quietly discarded. Speaking of sweat, you notice that no one wears light fabrics. Courtiers drape themselves in velvet and brocade layer upon layer, even in summer. Underneath the finery, the human body toils, but to remove a jacket or loosen a cravat in public would be indecent. Better to suffer in silence, dabbing the brow with a perfumed kerchief. And so Versailles becomes a greenhouse of body heat and fragrance. By midday, the air inside the salons is thick. The guests speak in hushed tones, fans flutter, eyes glimmer through powder. But underneath the elegant skin crawls with discomfort. You wonder how anyone can eat in this atmosphere until you learn that the smells are part of the appetite suppression. Courtiers often skip meals not out of vanity, but to avoid the nausea induced by the mingling of scents. Now step through the passage into the Dauphin's apartment. Even royal children are not spared the court's odd hygiene rituals. Young princes are taught early to avoid baths. They are powdered dressed and paraded as miniature adults. Nursemaids wipe them with linen soaked in vinegar and rose water, their ears swabbed, their mouths inspected. But behind the scenes, their clothes are rarely changed. Laundry is infrequent, as washing garments too often is believed to ruin the fabric. And so their beds grow musty, their linens stale. Bedpans are tucked beneath embroidered coverlets. Servants collect them daily, but spills are common. The mattresses are stuffed with straw or horsehair breeding grounds for mites. Fleas thrive in the creases. No one discusses it. Down the servants' corridor, conditions are worse. The lower ranks have no access to perfumed cloths or fine wigs. They sweat through their labor, often sleeping in their clothes, reeking of grease and soot from the kitchens or wax from the candles. They empty the chamber pots, scrub the marble steps with bare hands, and then return to their cramped quarters where lice are even more aggressive. Yet even among the servants, baths are rare and feared. You reach the Queen's private chapel. It's silent, serene, the air cooler. Here perhaps you expect some sense of purity. But the same candles burning inside have not been snuffed in weeks. The wax collects in dusty pools. Incense masks odors only temporarily. And the pew cushions never cleaned have absorbed years of human presence. And then there's the matter of dental hygiene. The court's standards are appallingly low. Toothbrushes exist in theory, but are often no more than twigs or cloths. Mouths are rinsed with wine or vinegar. Some chew mint or cloves, but few remove plaque. Blackened teeth are common especially among sugar-consuming elites. Louis XIV himself had several teeth pulled without anesthesia. The procedures were done in his bedroom in full view of courtiers. You cringe at the memory of the description, blood pooling on velvet sheets, the physician prying with iron tongs. Still, it is considered better to lose teeth than to suffer halitosis. Some nobles carry sachets of herbs to speak into freshening their breath before turning to speak with the king. Others simply avoid close contact. Behind one of the gilt doors, you glimpse a powder room not for makeup, but literally a space to apply hair powder. A servant stands ready with bellows and chalky paste. A marquis sits on a stool, his shoulders draped to protect his clothes. The powder contains starch, ash, even lead. It chokes the air, coats the lungs. But to leave your wig dull is to risk ridicule. The transformation takes hours, and the result is astonishing white hair, towering above a pale face. Red lips, darkened brows, a ghostly vision of nobility. Yet under the surface, everyone is itchy, raw, uncomfortable. The strangest contradiction is this: while Versailles seems to fear water, it worships the idea of purity. The palace's design is meant to awe with order and perfection. Symmetry in architecture, ritual in behavior. But none of it applies to the body. The human form is treated as something to disguise, to control, to ignore unless it serves a performance. You begin to understand that hygiene at Versailles isn't absent. It's just symbolic. A scented glove is not about cleanliness, but about class. A white wig is not about neatness, but about status. A bowl of lavender-scented vinegar does not disinfect, it distracts. And through it all, the king remains at the center. His habits dictate the courts. His resistance to bathing sets the tone. If he were to cleanse himself with water, perhaps the palace would follow. But for now, his body, like his kingdom, is perfumed, powdered, and perfunctory. And you've barely been here a day, and already your skin itches, your lungs ache, and your nose begs for mercy. But the tour is only just beginning. You find yourself trailing the scent of cinnamon and camphor through the Queen's guardroom, where sunlight trickles down from tall windows and dances along gilded moldings. The illusion of cleanliness continues. A servant bustles by, carrying a tray of Pomander's clove-stuffed oranges wrapped in lace and ribbon, delivered to courtiers who fear the miasma of bad air. Everyone here knows that smell is not just unpleasant, it is believed to be dangerous. According to the dominant medical theory of the day, foul odors cause disease. This belief defines hygiene at Versailles, not the removal of filth, but the masking of it. You pause beneath a portrait of Queen Marie Antoinette. Her cheeks dusted pink, her expression serene. Her toilette, a formal, semi-public grooming ceremony, has just ended. You missed the grand affair by minutes. But the scent of orris root violet powder and almond oil still lingers in the air. She did not bathe. Rather, her skin was wiped with scented cloths. Her hair reset, her stays tightened. Hairdressers, perfumers, and ladies-in-waiting fussed over every detail, not to cleanse her, but to craft her image. Versailles is not a place of hygiene. It is a theater of appearances. The Queen's dressing table is a study in ritual over function. Tiny crystal jars hold creams, waxes, perfumes. There's a brush made with boar's hair and a silver tongue scraper. The tongue scraper is rarely used. Powder is patted under the arms. clove oil dabbed on the temples to ward off headaches. You spot a container of hungry water, a distilled herbal concoction made from rosemary, once gifted to a queen in the hope it would restore youth. Every item has meaning, but few are meant to purify. You slip into a narrow service corridor. Unlike the ornate salons, this passage is dark and cramped, its air stale with age. Here, servants carry out the invisible labor of maintaining the fantasy above. Laundry is done by hand, and only when absolutely necessary. The soap used is brown, gritty, and harsh. Clothes are beaten against wooden boards, then hung in the shadowy alcoves to dry, provided it's not raining, in which case they remain damp for days. Mildew is common, yet linen undergarments being closest to the skin are prized. Nobles change them more often than outerwear, believing that clean linen will absorb sweat, and by extension, cleanse the body. The logic is flimsy, but it prevails. A maid passes with a bundle of petticoats. You notice the sweat stains under her arms, the raw skin around her knuckles from scrubbing. Her fingers are cracked and swollen, no gloves are provided for her. She coughs and you realize she's not sick with cold, but with long exposure to the lye-based soaps and chill air of the washrooms. The price of illusion weighs heavy on the invisible class. Emerging back into the light, you find yourself in one of the lesser salons where musicians are rehearsing for tonight's entertainment. Even music here is part of hygiene, the spiritual kind. It lifts the senses, distracts from the more earthy concerns. The nobility prides itself on refinement, on controlling the baser instincts. To speak openly of bodily functions is forbidden. It's alluded to with euphemisms or handled in silence. But that doesn't mean the body behaves. You glance at the corners of the salon and note a few footstools oddly positioned close to the wall. They conceal chamber pots. Some nobles, unwilling to leave a concert or salon, simply squat behind a screen or stool and return as if nothing happened. The servants clear the pots quietly, sometimes not until hours later. When the smell becomes unbearable, someone will open a window. If it's winter, they'll blame the chill on why no one should bathe. At the far end of the room, you see an older nobleman, perhaps in his 60s, scratching discreetly at the base of his powdered wig. It's not polite to notice, so you don't stare, but you know what it means. Head lice are rampant, and most wigs have small silver tools hidden in their lining to scratch or comb the scalp without removing the entire piece. Some wear linen caps under their wigs to protect their natural hair from the coarse powder and vermin, but it's only mildly effective. You catch sight of the nobleman's neck, red with irritation, the skin raw beneath his collar. Your attention shifts to a basket by the fireplace. At first you think it contains roses, but no, the blooms are dried. They're there to mask the smell of the fireplace, the stale smoke, and most likely the urine-soaked cushions. The fire doesn't warm the room so much as stir the trapped smells loose. Yet the nobles sit, smile, and sip their cordial, as if Versailles were a garden of paradise. Later, as you pass through the Queen's antechamber, a group of courtiers discuss a recent illness that swept through a neighboring estate. They speculate not on contagion, but on curses, spoiled air, and imbalanced humors. One blames an unburied body in the orchard. Another suggests the family failed to change their bed linens often enough. No one mentions hand-washing or water. In fact, one countess boasts that she hasn't bathed since Michaelmas and attributes her glowing complexion to this restraint. And what of menstrual hygiene? You find yourself in the company of a lady's maid who explains in hushed tones that women use cloth pads pinned into place, often reused until they fray. These are soaked in vinegar before laundering, but never boiled. It is said that a woman too clean might weaken her womb, and so the court dances on powdered painted and silent about the most basic parts of life. You make your way to the kitchens now. The heat is stifling the air, thick with meat drippings, boiling sugar, and the sharp tang of vinegar. Kitchen staff are no cleaner than their noble counterparts. Their aprons are stained, their faces blackened with soot. But even here, image is everything. Dishes are arranged with artful precision sauces colored with ground insects or gold leaf. The food is breathtaking to behold. But is it safe? That's another question. No one washes hands before preparing the goose pâté. The scullions slice raw meat beside trays of baked pears. Rats scurry along the saceboards. You notice a cook crush something underfoot and keep moving. Even the royal kitchen is a place where vermin are simply part of the environment, managed, never eradicated. And when the platters are brought up to the halls, they are covered in silver domes, not to preserve freshness, but to maintain the illusion. Because everything at Versailles, even hygiene, is a performance. The king dines with delicate manners, the courtiers dab their lips with fine linen, and somewhere behind the wall, a kitchen boy scratches his scalp and wipes his nose with the back of his hand. And so Versailles continues to gleam. It gleams despite the lice, despite the urine, despite the sour linen and perfumed rot. Because the palace does not require cleanliness. It requires spectacle. You begin to understand that at Versailles, the truth isn't scrubbed away. It's gilded. And you're still breathing it all in. The morning sun filters through the tall windows of the Salon de la Guerre, but the warmth is deceptive. As you step forward across the checkered marble, you notice something peculiar beneath your feet, a slickness that doesn't belong to polish. Someone has spilled a bowl of herbal rinse rosemary and lavender steeped in vinegar, meant for wiping down faces or perhaps dabbing wrists. The smell is strong, bordering on medicinal, but it doesn't conceal what lurks beneath the unmistakable musk of damp upholstery, human breath, and old wool. You step aside as a noblewoman passes, lifting the hem of her gown just enough to avoid brushing the floor. Her shoes, elaborately embroidered and utterly impractical, tip-tap delicately across the stone. She walks as if the world is clean, as if the air is pure, as if Versailles is not suffocating under its own secrets. But you've seen enough to know better now. The palace is starting to feel like a body, ornate on the surface, but pulsing with waste beneath. Hidden ducts lead to makeshift latrines tucked away in forgotten closets, their contents dumped into cesspits that lie beneath the marble. The smell rises unpredictably, sometimes even into the royal apartments. But the court pretends it doesn't. They light more candles, burn more incense, and hope that the stench doesn't follow them to the opera. You continue toward the Dauphine's chamber. She's seated at her harp, surrounded by ladies murmuring about powdered pigments and beauty patches. Tiny velvet spots, shaped like stars and moons, decorate their cheeks. These are not just fashionable, they serve a grim, practical purpose. To cover the blemishes left behind by smallpox and syphilis. Disease is common even here. No one is immune, not even royalty. They disguise illness with paint, perfume, and propriety. Hygiene again becomes deception. You glance at the table beside the harp. There's a small mirror, silver-backed, slightly tarnished, and a handful of brushes. One holds tooth powder, a gritty mixture of crushed coral and burnt bread crusts. Another carries coal for the eyes. A third is streaked with white lead used to smooth complexions. Poison masquerading as beauty. And then you see something stranger, still a bottle labeled mouse skin. It's exactly what it says. Strips of skin treated and curled used to create the false beauty marks so desired at court. You think back to the wigs, the powder, the rotting teeth behind ruby smiles. All of it built on layers of artifice. No one here is clean in the way you understand it. They are curated, constructed, masked. Down the corridor, a page boy hurries past with a bucket of lye and a stiff brush. One of the nobles has soiled a chair during last night's drinking. The staff works quickly. The stain must be removed before the Duchess returns for her morning visit. But the smell, pungent, warm, unmistakably human, lingers. You watch as the boy throws open the window and sprinkles dried herbs on the sill. Bay leaves thyme and marjoram, a futile attempt at freshness. Even the beds you're starting to notice seem more like traps than places of rest. The feather mattresses are never fully aired. Some have been in use for years, their interiors breeding mites, sweat, and mildew. Bed curtains are closed at night, not for warmth, but to contain body heat in the absence of regular washing. You pass one such room where the maid lifts the sheets, turns the straw tick, and winces at the smell. But she says nothing. She simply adds more lavender sachets between the folds. In the royal nursery, the same pattern repeats. Infants are swaddled tightly, not for comfort, but to prevent them from scratching at the lice that crawl across their scalps. Their nappies are not changed with urgency. They are checked by scent and only replaced when absolutely necessary. Midwives whisper about rashes and fevers, but they rely on charms and rosemary distillations rather than soap and water. The nursery windows are kept closed to keep out bad air, and so the rooms are stifling. You spot a child curled beneath a fur blanket, sweat beading along her brow, her cheeks flushed, not with health, but with heat. Her governess hums a lullaby, dabbing her face with vinegar. A physician will be summoned only if she stops crying altogether. You're beginning to understand why the palace is always filled with noise. Music, laughter, conversation, the flutter of fans. It all keeps your attention off the reality that is quite literally rotting beneath your feet. And yet when you reach the Hall of Mirrors again, the grandeur overwhelms you once more. The polished surfaces reflect hundreds of candles, each one shimmering like a star. Courtiers glide beneath crystal chandeliers in powdered grace. You almost forget what you've seen in the servants' wings, the kitchens, the nursery. This is the genius of Versailles. It seduces you into forgetting. A courtier approaches with a smile, his teeth blackened, his skin dusted with lead powder. He smells of rosewater and faint decay. Enchanté, he says. And you respond as you must with a bow, because now you are part of it. You know the truth, and yet you remain. You're swept into the crowd, moving toward the gardens for the midday promenade. The air out here is better, but not by much. Under the hedges, you spot handkerchiefs and old wrappers. Behind a marble statue, a gardener discreetly relieves himself. It's easier than returning to the palace. You look around. No one reacts. This is normal, expected. The fountains gurgle and spit, designed to mimic rivers and rain. But the water is stagnant, in many of them coated with algae and the occasional dead bird. Still, tourists and courtiers alike admire them. A boy tosses a coin into the Grand Canal, wishing for a good marriage. You make your way along the gravel path toward the Latona fountain. A noblewoman in bright yellow silk laughs loudly as she fans herself. You overhear her say she hasn't changed her stockings in a week. They're too delicate for laundering. Her companions nod in agreement. They too believe fabric deserves more care than skin. And then the wind shifts. It carries the scent of manure from the lower gardens, where workers have been fertilizing the soil. It mingles with the perfume on your collar, the sweat beneath your shirt, the powder in your hair. You no longer flinch. Versailles has made its way into your skin, your lungs, your thoughts. Hygiene here isn't cleanliness. It's denial perfected. Decay dressed in satin. And the most dangerous part, the longer you stay, the easier it is to pretend it's beautiful. You trail behind a group of courtiers, returning indoors, their laughter echoing lightly off the gilded walls. The scent of baked pears and roasted capon drifts up from the kitchens, but it's interlaced with something more pungent, an earthy, fermented odor that seems to follow the group like a shadow. One of the women in front of you adjusts her corset discreetly, and as she does, the sharp scent of musk and old sweat wafts from beneath the folds of her gown. No one flinches. No one comments. Here, unpleasant smells are as common as powdered wigs. You enter the Salon of Mars, dedicated to the god of war, its red velvet drapery heavy with years of candle soot and human presence. The thick fabrics have soaked up generations of odors. You feel it in your throat now, dry, bitter cloying. The room gleams with trophies and weaponry, yet it is hygiene that battles you hardest. It clings to your skin, sinks into your clothes, and there is no washing it off. A servant passes carrying a tray of scented gloves, each one infused with civet or ambergris. They are more than accessories, they are portable shields against the stench. Courtiers press them to their noses in crowded rooms, pretending to contemplate something deeply while simply avoiding inhalation. You watch as a nobleman uses one to discreetly wipe sweat from his forehead. He then tucks it into his sleeve to be used again at supper. The smell of sweat permeates everything. Silk gowns hold it. Velvet cushions trap it. Brocade vests wear it like a second skin, and no one dares disrupt the illusion by removing a layer. To undress in public view, even slightly, is to break the code of Versailles. So the court marinates in its own silence and odor, exchanging perfume recipes instead of soap. Your path takes you past a set of heavy double doors into the king's council chamber, where Louis XIV often meets with his ministers. The Sun King sits at the center of power, radiant in appearance, but deeply human beneath the gold embroidery. His personal physician is never far armed with remedies made from crushed pearls, deer antler, and tinctures of opium. But his hygiene regimen remains oddly fixed, dry, rubbing scented cloths and near-daily application of powders. On rare occasions, he's rubbed with almond oil, but never washed with water. Even during times of illness, when fever clings to his body and sweat pools in the folds of his clothing, he avoids bathing. You wonder how he can bear it. But then again, he doesn't have to. Dozens of servants stand ready to freshen the air with burning herbs, fan him with ostrich feathers, and change his linen underclothes multiple times a day. And because the king shuns bathing, so must the court. Cleanliness is not a matter of science. It is etiquette dictated from the throne. You step back into the corridor, where a maid is cleaning a spill with a rag dipped in wine vinegar and salt. The floor gleams momentarily, but you know it's only surface deep. Beneath the marble, beneath the polished facade, Versailles festers. The waste pits overflow more often than you'd imagine. On hot days, the stench rises through the cracks in the stone, filling the palace with its own kind of weather. And yet the court's solution is always the same: cover it, mask it, distract from it. So perfumes are made with increasingly exotic ingredients: musk from deer glands, ambergris from whale intestines, civet extracted from wildcats. You pass a perfumer's cart in the corner of the salon, its contents neatly arranged in glass bottles and ivory boxes. One vial reads, Eau de Reine Queen's Water, an elaborate blend of rose, sage, and nutmeg used to scent handkerchiefs and underclothes. But you know by now it doesn't cleanse. It only cloaks. By the time you reach the staircase to the upper apartments, your senses are overwhelmed. You feel as though you're walking through a mist of powder and sweat, ghosts of old meals and dried roses crushed underfoot. The stair rail is smooth worn by countless gloved hands, some perfumed, some sticky with residue from pomade and oil. You hesitate to touch it. At the top of the stairs, you find the Royal Library, its shelves lined with volumes on botany, philosophy, astronomy, and humoral medicine. One large tome lays open on a stand, its illustrations depicting the 4 bodily humors: black bile, yellow bile, blood, and phlegm. It's here you understand why Versailles is the way it is. Cleanliness in the modern sense doesn't exist. Health is believed to depend on balance, not sanitation. The balance is maintained through bleeding, purging, and sweating, not through washing. Baths, in fact, are often prescribed only to the dying, and even then with reluctance. They are considered dangerous, capable of inviting disease deeper into the body. One wrong exposure to cold after a bath, and it's believed your lungs could seize. Better to keep the body sealed, protected by layers of cloth and powder. Even the palace's water supply is suspect. The fountains and canals look grand, but the pipes that feed them are lined with lead. The water used for rinsing vegetables or mixing potions is often cloudy, and no one drinks it unless it's been steeped in herbs or turned into wine. You now understand why even the children are given diluted claret before breakfast. Water to Versailles is not the source of life. It is a threat to be flavored, boiled, or avoided altogether. And when someone dies because of gangrene or dysentery, or a simple infected tooth, no one questions the cause. They speak of imbalance, of air gone bad, of fate, never of hygiene. You sit down briefly on a low bench beside a tapestry, your body aching from the sensory overload. You've inhaled too much. Incense been jostled by too many powdered elbows, and your skin feels taut under the weight of dust and wax. But what surprises you most is that you're beginning to accept it. The longer you stay, the easier it becomes to overlook, to admire the gold leaf and not the grime. Versailles is teaching you something, not about cleanliness, but about compliance, about how a world can function elegantly, even beautifully, without washing away its filth so long as everyone agrees not to mention it. And you begin to wonder what smells still cling to you now. What has embedded itself in your clothes, your hair, your memory? But there's no time to dwell. The supper bell rings in the distance, and the nobles are already drifting toward the grand apartment. And you follow. The corridors grow livelier now as velvet and lace ripple past you like waves. Courtiers drift toward the grand apartment, with forced grace their faces painted and powdered into masks of composure. Beneath their carefully curled wigs and rouged cheeks, you see the fatigue setting in. Long hours in tight stays and stiff coats surrounded by candle smoke and unrelenting fragrance leave every noble at Versailles weary before the feast even begins. You're ushered along in the tide of movement, your shoes clicking on the marble floor, the scent of food stronger with every step. The aroma is rich duck in orange sauce glazed chestnuts, a mountain of oysters stacked high on silver trays. But your appetite falters. You've been behind the scenes. You've seen the kitchens and what lurks beneath the linen-draped tables. The smells no longer entice, they warn. Still, the palace expects performance, and the supper is no exception. The nobles file into the hall of abundance with rehearsed elegance. The air is thick, not just with the perfume of 100 bodies, but with expectation. Every movement, how one lifts a goblet, breaks a loaf of bread, dabs at the mouth, is part of a larger dance. Cleanliness isn't part of the choreography. Cleanliness, as you've come to understand it, doesn't belong here at all. You take your place near the edge of the hall, close enough to observe, but not so close that you must participate. From here, the details are clearer. A lady drops her fan, and as she retrieves it, her bodice creaks, the result of a week's worth of sweat trapped beneath embroidered satin. She rises, smiling, unaware that the back of her gown is darkened with perspiration. To your right, a count chews noisily. His hands, still marked from an afternoon of falconry, are unwashed. He fingers his meat delicately, careful not to soil his lace cuffs, but he licks his fingers after every bite. Beside him, a young marquis excuses himself with a brief cough. He pulls out a small handkerchief and dabs at his nose. You realize with a start that he'll likely reuse it for the next 3 days. And then you see it a fly hovering lazily over a bowl of compote. No one notices. Or perhaps they do and choose not to react. After all, flies are as much a part of Versailles as the chandeliers. A servant glides past with a ewer and basin. A guest reaches forward to rinse their fingers in the water only lightly, just a dip of the fingertips. The water turns cloudy after the first few hands, but the basin remains. It will not be changed. It is not there to clean. It is there to symbolize refinement. This is the paradox you've grown used to. Everything in Versailles is theatrical, including its hygiene. Soiled garments are perfumed, not laundered. Plates are wiped, not scrubbed. Silverware, when it's used at all, is more for show than for sanitation. And the hands that feed the nobility, those of the kitchen staff and valets, are rarely, if ever, washed with soap. After the feast, the court drifts once more into the salons for music and gambling. You follow a group into the Salon de Mercure, where the scent of card ink mingles with wine and wax. Men lean over tables, their wigs shifting slightly as they murmur bets. Women recline on fainting couches, one fanning herself with a painted screen, the other applying another layer of powder to her already ghost-white face. You sit at the edge of the room and let it wash over you, the laughter, the distant harpsichord, the flicker of candlelight against mirrored walls. It should feel glamorous, and in some ways it does. But now behind every detail you sense the decay. The couch is damp where someone's body rested too long. The candle wax is crusted with dust. A corner of the wall near the window has gone green with mold. It's painted over but not concealed. In the distance, the king himself passes through a side corridor, headed toward his private chambers. A group of ladies and gentlemen part like the sea, bowing and curtsying in silence. He acknowledges them with a nod, his face expressionless. Even from afar, you notice the sheen of sweat on his brow, the powder caked in the creases around his nose. Later, as the palace begins to dim, you wander down the smaller servants' stairs, curiosity leading you to the darker places. These are the guts of Versailles, where the illusion is not just weakened, but shattered. Here laundry hangs like ghosts from wooden beams. Chamber pots wait for emptying their contents, sloshing gently in the candlelight. A girl no older than 12 scrubs the same square of marble for the third time, not to clean it, but to make it appear clean. You see where the perfume is stored in rows of stoppered bottles, some labeled with ingredients you recognize, and others that turn your stomach musk civet tallow. You spot jars of pomade so thick they shine like oil, and beside them tiny combs for chasing out lice. Even the servants have standards you realize, but they're rooted in survival, not luxury. A boy pours vinegar into a foot basin, the same basin used by several nobles earlier in the day. He does not rinse it out. There is no time. Another noblewoman is waiting. The odor is sharp, sour, and nearly masks the foot rot it's meant to disguise. Nearly. By now, your own skin itches. Your clothes feel heavy with dust. Your breath carries a sweetness you no longer trust. You feel Versailles crawling up your spine, not just its filth, but its philosophy. This is a world where the body is ornamental. Not something to be cared for, but something to be hidden, powdered, and draped in brocade. The body's needs are shameful. Its processes are ignored or smothered in scent. Cleanliness, as you understand it, does not exist here, not in a practical sense. But Versailles doesn't want clean. It wants spectacle. And every foul breath, every stained cushion, every lice-ridden wig is simply part of the stage. And so you return upstairs, passing a row of sleeping footmen curled in the corridor, their hair matted with sweat, their skin pale from fatigue. No one will clean them. No one will clean anything tonight. The music still echoes faintly as you slip back toward the guest wing, where your own makeshift bed awaits. You breathe in. And you wonder, have you stopped noticing the smell? The guest wing is quieter now, dimly lit, and heavy with the residue of the day. The air, thick with lavender and candle smoke, settles on your skin like a second layer. You walk slowly, your feet whispering against the worn carpets, and for a moment, the palace feels almost peaceful. But it's a stillness born of exhaustion, not serenity. Versailles doesn't sleep. It merely lowers its voice. Your room, if it can be called that, is modest by court standards, but still ornamented with gold trim and threadbare tapestries. A washstand stands in the corner holding a single cracked basin and a pitcher of tepid water. You lift the lid and sniff cautiously. It smells faintly of rust and lye, not inviting. Still, it's the only water you've seen offered directly for personal use all day. You pour a little into the bowl and dip your fingertips in. It leaves a filmy residue like it's been standing too long. A small towel stiff with starch and edged in lace lies folded beside the basin. You touch it to your face. The cloth is dry and smells faintly of rose, but the dust that clings to it makes you sneeze. You sit on the edge of the bed and look around. The mattress sags in the middle. The sheets, while neatly arranged, are yellowed at the edges and faintly spotted. You lift the corner to peek beneath straw, packed thick and musty. No surprise. The bed curtains are drawn open, but you see the trail of small black specks near the folds, droppings from mice, or perhaps the remains of crushed bed bugs. You feel a tickle along your calf and quickly brush it away. Whether imagined or not, you're not taking chances. You lie back and close your eyes, but the silence presses against your ears. Versailles, you've realized, is never silent in the way the countryside is. Even in the guest wing, distant echoes hum the creak of a beam, the faint scuttle of vermin in the walls, the mutter of servants finishing their rounds. Someone snores softly behind the adjoining wall, and then the smell rises again. A slow seep. It's a mix you've come to recognize without effort, now wax mildew iron from the pipes, powdery perfume gone sour. The residue of too many bodies passing through this space, all attempting to pretend they weren't. You shift on the mattress and stare at the dark canopy overhead, wondering how anyone at Versailles sleeps like this every night. But they do. They've trained themselves to. Or perhaps they simply don't notice anymore. In the hallway you hear hushed voices, two chambermaids whispering. They're discussing a nobleman who collapsed during supper. A stroke, perhaps, or too much brandy. One says he was found behind a screen near the staircase, soaked in his own filth. The other mutters that no one will mention it by morning. A fresh screen will be brought in the carpet, turned, as if he'd never been there at all. That's how Versailles works. Not through resolution, but erasure. Problems are hidden. Discomfort is ignored. Hygiene, like everything else, is a matter of spectacle and suggestion. You wonder how many such stains are covered even now. How many gowns harbor old sweat? How many wigs carry lice? How many smiles mask infections festering beneath gums? And how many mirrors reflect not beauty, but rot? But even rot can be polished. That's the Versailles way. Your mind drifts toward the servants again. Their lot is worse, yet strangely more honest. They sweat openly. They curse the chamber pots. They sleep in corners and wipe their hands on aprons. They may not be clean, but at least they do not pretend. In the palace above, everything is pretense. A noblewoman scratches her wig in rhythm with the harpsichord. A courtier applies rose pomade to his neck to hide the sourness of a healing boil. A priest swings incense not for prayer, but to battle the stink of an unwashed chapel. It's everywhere. And the longer you stay, the more insidious the illusion becomes. You start to think maybe it's not so bad. Maybe a little filth is manageable. You dab your face with rose water and convince yourself it's freshening. You dust your sleeves and pretend it's cleansing. You begin to perform, too, lying there listening to the slow groan of Versailles, exhaling its secrets. You imagine the palace as a grand organism, breathing, sweating, leaking. Its rooms are lungs filled with perfumed air. Its halls are arteries pulsing with courtiers. Its bones creak beneath the weight of generations. And its skin, golden and glimmering, hides every blemish with powdered grace. You can't help but admire it. The next morning, the lever will begin again. The king will rise surrounded by nobles eager to be seen. He'll be wiped, not washed, dressed, not cleansed, perfumed, not purified. The court will follow suit, because that is the law Versailles teaches, not written in books, but in gestures, in silences, in smells. You roll onto your side, the mattress groaning beneath you. A faint sour odor rises from the linen. You breathe through your mouth. Even that carries a taste now, a blend of candle smoke and hair powder and regret. And you wonder again, when exactly did you stop noticing? Your eyes close, but the palace does not fade. It lives inside your breath now. You wake to the sound of footsteps, dozens of them. They echo faintly down the corridor, accompanied by muffled voices and the rustling of fabric. The sun hasn't fully risen, but the court is already stirring. The lever approaches. It's time for the king's waking ritual, and time for Versailles to resume its daily performance. You sit up slowly, body stiff from the straw mattress, throat dry, from a night spent breathing air thick with old perfume and wax. The room hasn't changed. The scent still clings to the curtains. The water in the basin is colder now, a thin film coating its surface. You splash a bit on your face and instantly regret it. The chill is biting, and the water smells faintly metallic like coins left in the rain. You pull on your garments, trying not to think about the fact that they too carry the palace with them. A mixture of rosewater dust and sweat that's woven into every thread. There's no escaping it now. You've entered the rhythm of this place, and with it, its silent pact to endure the discomfort and never name it. The hallway is already bustling. Footmen carry trays of morning broth, while ladies in waiting glide past, cradling bundles of fresh linens, at least what passes for fresh here. You know better now. The linen has likely been reused, aired briefly by a window, then folded and perfumed, still damp in spots, still streaked with the memory of someone else's night. As you approach the king's chambers, the press of bodies thickens. Nobles high and low gather for the privilege of witnessing the monarch's rise. It's a scene of reverence and rivalry, each person vying for a better spot, a better glance, a closer moment near the center of power. Inside the royal bed is more stage than resting place. Draped in crimson and gold, it gleams under morning light. Yet the air is close, heavy with the scent of old feathers and stale warmth. A valet opens the bed curtains and bows low. Louis XIV stirs. The ritual begins. He's not alone, of course. A physician stands nearby with a small bottle of herbal tonic, a barber with fresh powder, a perfumer holding gloves. There is no soap, no basin of clean water. Instead, the king has wiped his face, his hands under his arms gently with alcohol-soaked cloths. It's more gesture than cleansing. His undergarments are changed, and for a moment you see the toll of time on his skin. Redness where fabric has rubbed too long. The faint trace of sores where the body has protested its confinement. But all is quickly covered. A new shirt scented with lavender, a wig heavily powdered and placed with care. The king becomes himself again, not by bathing, but by layering on the symbols of his station. You step back as courtiers murmur their admiration. None speak of the king's scent, which lingers faintly in the chamber, even after he leaves for mass. It's a blend you now recognize easily, a base of sweat overlaid with ambergris and orris root, and finished with the sharp sting of spirits. After the lever, the court disperses, some to the chapel, others to the gardens. You follow a group outdoors, grateful for the coolness of morning air. It carries the scent of dew and tilled earth, which feels strangely foreign now. Natural. Clean. You walk along the Grand Canal where gondolas float lazily. The water sparkles, but you know better than to trust it. It's filled from local sources streams that run through villages where waste disposal is a suggestion at best. No one drinks it. No one washes in it. And yet it's beautiful, framed by sculpted hedges and polished marble steps. Further down, you spot a gardener spreading manure near a row of rose bushes. The smell hits quickly. A noblewoman nearby lifts a pomander to her face, her expression unchanging. You've seen that look often now, a practiced indifference, a refusal to react. That's how Versailles manages through practiced ignorance. And yet the need to cleanse never fully disappears. It simmers just beneath the surface. Some courtiers seek private ways to feel cleaner. A cloth soaked in lemon juice. A brief scrub with ashes and vinegar in a servant's quarters. One lady is rumored to wash her feet once a week in almond milk, a scandalous act of indulgence. These quiet rituals go unspoken. To admit to the desire for true cleanliness would be to betray the palace's unwritten code. You continue past to the orangerie where sweet citrus blooms in forced symmetry. It's stunning, but the walls behind the trees are blotched with mold, and the drains overflow with rainwater gone foul. Beauty here always masks decay. That's the Versailles rule. Inside the palace, once more you cross into the Salon of Apollo. Here, courtiers gather for midday entertainment, a musical performance perhaps, or a reading. The air is thick again. The candles are lit, though the sun still shines. Their smoke curls lazily toward the painted ceiling, mixing with the ever-present fog of human presence. You notice a young man leaning against a column. His cravat is stained. His hair under the powder is matted. He closes his eyes briefly as the music begins. And for a moment he looks free, released from the need to perform, but only for a moment. Then he straightens, smooths his coat, and re-enters the scene. That's what hygiene has become here, a performance, a dance of distraction and ritual. Cleanliness is not about soap and water, it's about looking untouched, even when every part of you aches from the weight of filth. You pass by the royal barber's antechamber where wigs are being restyled. The air is dense with pomade and powdered starch. Hair from wigs is brushed into piles, some human, some horse. Lice scurry among the curls. No one bothers to kill them. They'll be powdered again, buried under another layer of illusion. And suddenly you realize something: Versailles doesn't want you clean. It wants you to accept the mask, to live inside it, to powder over your discomfort, perfume your disgust, and smile as though nothing beneath the skin matters. You leave the room and breathe in deeply. The smell that fills your lungs is the same it's been for days now, a medley of wax, sweat, and deception. And yet, you no longer flinch. You find yourself drifting through the Hall of Battles, its soaring ceilings and dramatic paintings stretching far above your head. The noise of the court fades behind you, muffled now beneath the weight of history. The room smells of cold stone and aged canvas, a break from the perfume-soaked air of the living chambers. It's almost refreshing until your nose catches something more familiar. Mildew faint but distinct, seeping from behind a drape, nestled into the creases of the velvet benches where no one dares sit. Even in this grand hall meant to commemorate conquest and glory, the truth of Versailles lingers. The past, like the present, is not preserved in pristine form. It's coated in dust, hidden beneath wax, and protected by silence. Cleanliness, as always, is a matter of perception. A group of visitors shuffle through the space, speaking softly, their boots echoing across the floor. You watch one of them discreetly scratch at his wrist, lifting his lace cuff, just enough to reveal reddened skin. You know what that means now. Mites, or maybe the rash from too much powder. It could even be the fabric itself, dyed with toxic chemicals, as so many garments are. Fashion here doesn't forgive. It itches, it bruises, it burns, and still the nobles wear it with pride. You step outside for a moment into the colonnade overlooking the vast gardens. The breeze is brisk today, lifting the corners of your coat and bringing with it the scent of cut grass and wet soil. But it also carries something sharper, the unmistakable tang of waste carried from the stables mixed with the less definable odor of a place where too many people relieve themselves in places never meant for it. A servant brushes past you, carrying a chamber pot wrapped in linen. It sloshes faintly, and you step quickly aside, not trusting the tightness of the cover. He descends the stairs toward the servants' quarter, where dozens more will be waiting for disposal. Some are dumped into open pits far behind the palace. Others are emptied directly into nearby fields used for gardening. Nothing is truly separated here, waste and beauty rot, and ritual. They coexist under the same gilded gaze. Back inside, you trail a path toward the Royal Theatre. You've been told it's one of the more modern wings of Versailles, boasting acoustics and elegance unlike any other. And at first glance, that's true. The seats are upholstered, the wood polished to a deep, dark sheen. Gilded trim frames the stage, and velvet curtains hang in folds thick enough to mute a whisper. But when you sit, your palm sinks into the seat cushion and comes away slightly damp. You try not to react. The smell is faint but familiar. Sweat, stale perfume, old wine maybe. The fabric has absorbed decades of court bodies pressed into it for hours at a time. You glance down and see faint stains on the floor near your feet, smoothed over by age, but still there. Ghosts of messes never truly cleaned. A performance begins. Singers in elaborate costumes step onto the stage, voices rising to fill the space. The music distracts you for a time. But as you watch the movement, the gestures, the beauty of the composition, you begin to realize this is Versailles in miniature. A stage, a perfected illusion, a carefully choreographed fantasy that demands you believe no matter what reality lies beneath. You glance around the audience. The nobles sit upright, eyes wide, faces unmoving beneath powder and rouge. A lady fans herself not out of heat, but to circulate the perfume rising from her bodice. A man beside her sips wine and wipes the rim of his goblet with a napkin, already damp with grease. The people do not change, only the setting. And when the curtain falls and applause thunders, you rise slowly and return to the corridors where the illusion thickens once again. This time you pass the apothecary's chamber. It's a strange little room tucked near the physician's quarters. Inside shelves are lined with jars, crushed pearl-dried rose petals, bits of coral and mercury. Yes, mercury used in tonics meant to purify the blood. There's also soap, though it's rarely used. Hard yellowish cakes of lye and animal fat, bitter-smelling and rough to the touch. They sit in stacks, mostly untouched. They're considered too harsh for noble skin unless someone is suffering from an affliction so visible it can no longer be ignored. Then, and only then, will water be boiled and soap summoned, always reluctantly. You walk on and hear a valet discussing his master's rash. He attributes it to bad air near the terrace. Another servant suggests hanging a sachet of rosemary near the bed. They don't speak of washing. The rash will be powdered, perfumed, hidden. Every ailment is met with ritual. Boils are pierced with golden needles. Teeth are pulled in the bedchamber with no more than a swig of wine and a silk handkerchief to bite. No sterilization, no antiseptic, just pain and bravado, and the quiet hope that it won't fester too badly. But it usually does. You turn a corner and find yourself once again in the Queen's private library. The door is slightly ajar. You step inside and are struck by how peaceful it feels here. Shelves of leather-bound volumes line the walls. The air is dry, scented faintly of ink and paper. A rare break from the odors of body and food and smoke. Yet even here you find the mark of Versailles. A feather quill, still damp with ink, sits atop a blotting pad stained dark brown, not just with ink, but likely with spilled tonic or worse. On a side table, a goblet sits half full of claret, and beside it, a discarded glove. You lift it slightly. The fingers are stiff. Inside the lining is discolored. Another illusion peeled back. You sit in one of the chairs by the window and look outside. The gardens roll outward in symmetrical splendor, but you no longer see perfection. You see a carefully managed system of concealment. You see waste pushed just out of view, sickness repackaged as sophistication, dirt dressed in diamonds. Versailles isn't just unhygienic, it's allergic to truth. Everything that touches the body is reshaped into symbol fragrance fashion ritual. The body is too real, too crude, too mortal, so it must be ignored even as it suffers, and you once merely a visitor are no longer immune. The powder is on your collar. The smell of ambergris lingers in your hair. You're learning not just to tolerate it, but to participate. The palace doesn't clean itself. It absorbs you. Afternoon stretches across the grounds of Versailles, washing the palace in golden light that only serves to deepen its contrasts. You walk slowly now, not because you're tired, though you are, but because your senses have become trained to notice things you wouldn't have seen before. A shadow beneath a tapestry, a damp stain beneath a bench cushion. The way a courtier discreetly adjusts his waistband with fingers that never look entirely clean. The Hall of Mirrors beckons again, that grand artery of light and illusion, and you step into its brilliance. The mirrors reflect hundreds of candles, dozens of bodies, and one you recognize now as your own. Your reflection tinged with powder, your posture stiffened by observation. You don't look cleaner than you did yesterday. You look more assimilated. The courtiers here are in full display mode. Conversation flows, fans flick open and closed with rhythmic precision, and not a soul seems to notice the haze lingering in the air. You always do now. Beneath the powdered perfume and citrus oil lies something unmistakable: skin. Unwashed, overheated, perfumed into exhaustion. You hear someone speak of a new beauty cream made from crushed swan's egg and honey. Another describes an imported soap from Venice, but it's not for use, only for show. Displayed in a porcelain dish on the vanity. The idea of bathing is flirted with the way one might speak of a forbidden book. Intriguing, sensational, best left untouched. You slip out of the room and make your way toward the Queen's staircase. It spirals upward, gleaming with polished stone worn smooth by foot traffic. The air shifts as you climb. Cooler here, thinner. You breathe deeply and detect chalk dust and a faint trace of old paint. You're nearing one of the more private areas now, the royal dressing chambers. These are spaces where the palace almost lets down its guard. Almost. You're granted entry escorted by a valet who barely glances your way. Inside, you find yourself in a powdering room. The floor is coated in a fine layer of starch dust. The smell is sharp, something between flour and must. Wigs hang from pegs on the wall, some freshly styled, others in the process of being deloused. A young servant works silently, brushing each with a thick comb dipped in vinegar and oil. You watch as tiny dark specks are flicked away into a corner, not a bin. There is no system of disposal, just corners. Across the room, a basin steams gently. A footbath has been drawn not for washing, but to soften calluses. The water is tinted brown with herbs. A noblewoman perches nearby on a padded stool, one foot soaking, the other resting on a pillow. Her maid powders her shoulders as they wait, neither acknowledging your presence. The noblewoman says something quietly about a rash, and the maid replies that it will fade with more powder. Always more powder. A cupboard opens, and you glimpse the items inside: rabbit fat, balm, rose ointment, dried mouse tails for hair growth, and several boxes of lead-based rouge. There's also a jar labeled syrup of violets meant to calm indigestion. Most of the remedies here do little to heal. They only redirect the discomfort mask, it layer it, defer it. You leave before the powder settles in your throat again. By now, you know where to go when you need air. The terrace behind the Queen's wing is less crowded. You pass through the tall doors and let the breeze wrap around you. For a moment, you pretend it's clean. But even here, the sharpness of manure and must is never far. You look over the balustrade and spot a servant hauling a bucket across the gravel. He stops, checks the path, and empties it into a trench. You know what's in that bucket, and you know where that trench leads. A nobleman walks past, and you recognize him by scent before sight. A blend of clove, myrrh, and something sour underneath. His lips are pale, his eyes red-rimmed. He coughs quietly into a scented kerchief. Consumption, maybe, or something worse. But he's dressed beautifully, and that is enough. No one asks questions. Later, you're guided into the Salon de la Paix, a chamber filled with light paintings of cherubs and clouds and the constant hum of subdued conversation. Here, the court practices the art of refined leisure: card games, poetry readings, subtle flirtations. You take a seat beside a painted screen and watch. The lady across from you shifts in her chair. Her bodice creaks with strain, her hands white with powder. She smiles, but her teeth, what's left of them, are gray at the gums. She reaches for a candied violet and chews it slowly, her jaw clicking slightly. The sweetness hides the breath. Barely. Someone begins to read aloud. A poem about purity, about beauty untouched. The irony nearly chokes you. You slip away again, this time toward the servants' wing. There's something almost grounding about it now. The chaos, the honesty, the absence of pretense. You pass through a narrow passage where wash water is being hauled in buckets and the floor is slick with overflow. Two boys mop in silence, their faces blank. One uses the same rag for 3 buckets. The cloth is dark, soaked through, but he keeps wringing and reusing. You hear a woman shout about lice in the linen again. You hear someone laugh about finding a mouse in the butter. These aren't secrets. they're realities. And no one here bothers to hide them. And still, even here, the desire for beauty lingers. A young scullery maid has braided her hair with bits of ribbon pulled from a discarded gift box. Her cheeks are pink, not from rouge, but from scrubbing pots for hours. She looks up as you pass, and her smile is real. Tired, but real. It's in that moment that you realize hygiene at Versailles isn't just about denial. It's about longing. The longing to be clean, to feel light, to escape the itch, the stink, the weight of layered filth, if only for a breath. But breath is hard to come by here. You head back toward the main quarters, navigating now, not just with your eyes, but with your nose. You've learned the map of scent, where the air thickens, where the mold creeps, where the perfume gathers like fog. You know where the rot hides and where it's painted over. And with each step, you understand more clearly Versailles does not cleanse. It costumes. And you too are in costume now. Evening begins to drape itself over the palace like another layer of velvet. Candles flicker to life across the salons, casting warm halos onto silk wallpaper and crystal trim. From a distance, Versailles glows golden soft, inviting. But up close, you know better. The candlelight doesn't cleanse. It conceals. Shadows blur stains. Warmth disguises odor, and the court prepares once again to dazzle itself into forgetting. You make your way toward the Salon de Musique, where a string quartet plays near the fireplace. The music floats light and elegant, while guests murmur between sips of claret and spoonfuls of preserved peaches. The tablecloths are freshly laid, or at least appear to be, and powdered wigs bob gently in rhythm with the melody. But the smell, yes, always the smell, cuts through. Beneath the violets and sandalwood, beneath the beeswax and wine, there's that same persistent layer, damp velvet, scorched fat from the kitchens, a tang of sour underarms poorly masked by musk. You've developed a sensitivity now like a sixth sense. You can tell who hasn't changed their underlinen in days. You can tell whose wig was last repowdered this morning and whose has gone 3 days too long. The dancers begin to move, gliding across the parquet in shoes far too delicate for the palace's filth-stained floors. You spot dark patches where melted wax was hurriedly scraped away. One of the ladies catches her heel and stumbles. Her powdered face breaks its serenity for only a second, and then she smiles again, lips reglossed, cheeks repowdered. You drift toward the wall, standing beneath a portrait of Louis XIV himself in full regalia. He stares down with pride and detachment, his body resplendent in brocade and lace. You wonder how he smelled when this portrait was painted, whether the room had to be aired, whether the artist added a sprig of lavender beneath his collar to stomach the hours of posing. Likely not. By then, the stench had already become part of Versailles' air. Someone behind you coughs a sharp, wet sound, and you turn instinctively. A footman bends forward slightly, covering his mouth with a sleeve. There's a splash of crimson at the edge. He straightens, wipes it on his apron, and walks off without a word. Consumption. The court whispers about it, but only as rumor. The footman will be replaced. The wall will be wiped. The curtain drawn back. You leave the room unable to watch the performance any longer. The further you go from the grand salons, the more relaxed the atmosphere becomes. You pass a servant's alcove where 2 maids are sharing a crust of bread, talking in low tones about the queen's sleeping habits. One claims she hasn't left her bedchamber in days. Another says she sleeps fully dressed now, afraid of bedbugs. You suspect both are true. You descend a flight of stone steps, winding your way down to a hallway you haven't yet explored. The scent here is different, earthier. It takes a moment to place it, but then you understand. Laundry. You arrive at the palace's lower washhouse where servants work in shifts to scrub the linens of royalty. Except scrubbing is a generous term. A single tub lined with cracked stone holds what passes for hot water. It's cloudy and still the soap sitting like oil on the surface. A woman plunges a shift into it and stirs it like stew. Nearby, a man beats sheets against a slanted board, his face blank with fatigue. You count perhaps 3 bars of soap between them. All are slivered gray and flecked with grit. A pile of linens sits beside the fire, steaming in the chill air. You reach down to touch one, curious. It's damp. Still smells faintly of mildew and human skin. They'll be dried quickly, maybe dusted with rose water, then returned to the queen's chamber or a duke's dressing room. None of this is sanitary. It's a system of rotation, not renewal. Waste disguised as ritual, and yet they try. A girl stirs a pot of rosemary and vinegar, muttering something under her breath. A charm, a prayer. Perhaps both. Even here, beneath the court's scrutiny, the people cling to small forms of hope. A clean sheet, a day without lice, a night without wheezing. You head back upstairs, your feet heavier now, not just from walking, but from knowledge, from the weight of seeing too much. And as you re-enter the royal wings, you notice a distinct change, not in the smell, which is the same, but in your reaction. You're no longer shocked. You're acclimated. It happens to everyone. Even the most fastidious noble newly arrived begins with disgust. But within days they powder their wigs and accept the lice. They hold pomanders to their noses and learn to smile through the rot. Versailles doesn't purge its visitors, it transforms them. You return to the guest wing and sit by the open window, hoping the air will feel different tonight. Fresher, cleaner. It doesn't. The gardens below are beautiful in the moonlight, but they breathe the same decay as everything else here. The waste pits never rest. The chamber pots are never empty for long. Below you watch as a pair of servants carry out a mattress. It sags heavily stained in patches, the stuffing oozing slightly at the seams. They dump it beside the stables and walk away. Tomorrow a new one will replace it. New stuffing, new silk. Same bodies. You close the shutters and light the single candle beside your bed. Its smoke curls upward, a ribbon of scentless gray, and for a moment you imagine it cleansing the air. It doesn't. You lie down and pull the coverlet over your chest, already knowing the itching will return before long. Your skin feels tight with powder. Your scalp tingles beneath your hair. But you don't move. You're learning to be still. That's the Versailles way. If you stay quiet enough, the filth becomes part of the wallpaper. You stop fighting. You stop reacting. And the longer you lie there, the more you forget what clean ever felt like. The next morning, sunlight slices through the edges of the shutter like a scalpel laying pale stripes across the faded coverlet. You wake with a start, half unsure of where you are, until the ache in your joints and the musty weight of the sheets remind you. Versailles. The illusion still intact. The performance still running. You swing your legs out of bed and feel the scratch of coarse linen against your skin. Beneath your feet, the carpet is thin, worn smooth by centuries of shoes that, like yours, trudged through a palace too lavish to acknowledge its own filth. Your body feels grimy, your scalp tight with dried sweat and powder. You check the water pitcher. Empty. You already know that if you ask for more, you'll be handed another few ounces, tepid and cloudy, likely hauled from a shared barrel, used for rinsing hands, wiping floors, and if you're lucky, loosely cleaning fruit. You make your way into the corridor. The palace is already alive with motion. Servants are changing chamber pots with the speed and efficiency of those who've long since stopped registering what they carry. One of them stumbles on the staircase and a splash hits the wall. No one reacts. Another brings up a bundle of what appear to be fresh towels. You glance as he passes. The fabric is stiff, already yellowed. You doubt it's even damp from washing, more likely perfumed and pressed into shape. Back in the public chambers, the ritual of the morning begins again. The king's lever proceeds as always, dignified, precise, and entirely unconcerned with sanitation. Louis XIV appears freshly dressed, powdered anew, but the scent trailing behind him is the same, a base of sweat. Overlay of orris root and myrrh and the acidic tang of aging flesh. No one flinches. No one comments. The silence of Versailles is not the absence of noise, it's a pact of denial. You take a seat in the Queen's antechamber, where ladies prepare themselves for another day of performance. A pair of attendants are working on a young duchess, recoating her face in lead-based powder, carefully brushing off flakes from the previous day without wiping the skin beneath. Her eyes are glassy. She hasn't slept well. You hear her say something about itching. One of the attendants murmurs, "That's just the skin tightening. It means the product is working." You suppress a shiver. A nearby nobleman discusses his plans for the day, fanning himself idly. He smells sharply of bergamot and soapwort, a blend that's meant to suggest cleanliness. But you catch it again, that undercurrent beneath the fragrance, body odor, stale breath, unbrushed teeth. You glance at his mouth as he laughs. His gums are red swollen, his teeth lined with plaque. He sips wine from a crystal goblet, and you notice that he uses the same handkerchief to dab his lips, his brow, and moments later his nose. He folds it and returns it to his coat. Another lady complains that her corset has caused welts on her ribs. She lifts her bodice slightly to reveal raised red marks. The physician called it a heat rash. His solution, powder it, and wear a looser corset next week. These are daily aches of Versailles. No one cries out. No one begs for relief. To be clean, to be truly comfortable, is to risk exposing the lie. And this lie is sacred. You pass through the salons where dancers rehearse for the evening's entertainment. They move gracefully, but their bodies glisten, their breath short and sharp. Sweat trickles beneath wigs, darkening the edge of powdered periwigs. A boy slips during a pirouette, his heel catching on a floorboard. The fall reveals a patch of raw skin where his stockings have rubbed through. A tutor rushes to him, helps him up, and applies a dash of perfume from a vial to the injury. No cloth, no bandage, just perfume. You make your way toward the kitchens again. There's something raw about the kitchens, somehow more honest. The cooks are loud, busy swearing openly as they prepare trays of stuffed quail and sugared almonds. The floors are sticky with grease and flies swarm near the open baskets of fruit. A scullion wipes a knife on his apron and immediately begins slicing cheese. No rinse, no pause. You're not surprised anymore, not even disturbed, just resigned. One cook speaks of a noblewoman who collapsed during last night's supper. She had been unable to keep food down for days, and her skin had turned the color of cold butter. She's expected to recover, of course, because no one dies at Versailles, at least not officially. Only servants die here. Nobles retreat to their country homes. Even death must wear a mask. Back through the corridors, a wave of laundry passes you, piles of sweat-stained sheets, petticoats flecked with makeup, and worse. A maid struggles with a load too large and part of it spills onto the floor. Another servant helps her gathering up a chemise so soiled it leaves a mark on the marble. They do not flinch. They do not stop. They simply carry on, and you're beginning to understand how it happens, how the mind adapts, how the senses dull, how the palace bends even the most reluctant soul into submission, not with force, but with repetition. You run a hand down the edge of a banister and feel it smooth, almost polished from years of use. But when you lift your hand to your face, you smell it oil from countless palms, old powder, faint mildew. There is no surface untouched here, no air unbreathed. Even the mirrors, for all their brilliance, are coated with the breath of generations. And as the day moves forward, you catch sight of your own reflection again. Your collar is dusted with powder. Your fingertips smell of rose and sweat. And your eyes have grown used to it. Versailles does not beg for acceptance. It expects it. And now you realize it has yours. Afternoon fades to dusk, and the light filtering through the palace windows turns soft and golden, tinting everything it touches with a false warmth. You wander slowly now, moving through Versailles, not as a visitor, but as someone absorbed into its rhythm. You no longer hesitate before sitting, no longer wrinkle your nose at the mingled scent of perfume and decay. You've stopped noticing the grime beneath the gilding, because noticing means confronting it, and Versailles teaches you to look away. In the Salon de Diane, a gathering is underway. Philosophers, artists, ladies of taste, and gentlemen of wit, all assembled beneath a frescoed ceiling. Someone recites poetry while another sips chocolate from a painted porcelain cup. The scene is elegant, sophisticated, and if you didn't know better, immaculate. But you do know better. You see the smudge on the poet's lace cuff, the yellowed edge of a glove lifted delicately to a powdered cheek. You hear the subtle wheeze in a baron's breath as he laughs. You notice the makeup caked into the corner of a duchess's eye, the faint tremble of a hand that's powdered over cracked skin. Nothing is pristine, only preserved. Barely. A servant kneels at the edge of the room, discreetly polishing a spill on the parquet with a cloth that's already streaked from another mess. He works silently, diligently. No one thanks him. They act as though he's invisible, just another moving part of the machinery that keeps the illusion alive. You step into the Queen's antechamber again, where a soft clamor of fans and low voices fills the air. The ladies here are preparing for the evening's formal gathering. Their wigs are taller tonight, powdered more heavily. One woman lifts her arms to adjust her bodice, revealing dark circles of sweat staining the lining of her gown. Her maid discreetly pats them with a cloth dabbed in violet water, then quickly powders over the dampness. Not to clean, only to conceal. The scent in the room is almost unbearable now. Jasmine, civet, damp silk. Underneath it all, a sharpness like unwashed skin warmed by firelight. And yet the conversation continues untouched by reality. They speak of theater, of embroidery, of a dog that caught fleas from a visitor's lap. No one mentions their own discomfort. No one admits the itch beneath their collar, the rash growing under corsets, the swelling in their gums. These are not topics for Versailles, not even among friends. You pass through the corridor toward the royal chapel, where vespers are underway. The priest swings the thurible gently, and incense curls upward in smoky tendrils. It fills your nostrils, masking everything for a moment. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. Frankincense. Myrrh. A strange sweetness beneath perhaps mold in the wood, perhaps just the breath of hundreds of bodies kneeling in reverence over decades. The chapel feels sacred, but not sterile. The benches are polished, but they carry the faint sheen of sweat from every hand that's gripped them. The air is heavy not just with incense, but with human presence, layers upon layers compacted over time. Even the altar cloth bears faint traces of wax and age. After the service, a nobleman approaches the pulpit to offer a short address. As he speaks, you notice his powdered wig slipping slightly, revealing raw patches along his scalp. He scratches discreetly, then pulls his lace cuffs down over his hands to hide the tremor in his fingers. He looks exhausted, pale beneath the powder, but his voice remains steady. That's what matters here, not health, not comfort, but performance. Later, you return to the gardens, drawn by the promise of fresh air. The fountains bubble their waters, catching the last glow of sunlight. Birds chirp from the hedgerows. From a distance, it looks like paradise, but up close, it's the same story. The gravel paths are littered with petals, yes, but also with discarded handkerchiefs and pieces of lace dropped from hurried hands. Behind a hedge, you spot a valet relieving himself. No shame, just necessity. There are few privies in the gardens and even fewer that are usable. The marble seats are rarely cleaned. Most visitors prefer the grass. The breeze shifts and the scent of manure from the flower beds drifts your way. The gardeners are still fertilizing the soil. You remember now that the royal gardeners sometimes use the waste collected from the palace's chamber pots. It's efficient. Versailles is nothing if not resourceful in its denial. You turn back toward the palace where candles now glow in every window. The night's festivities will begin soon. Music, dancing, another opportunity to forget what lies beneath the satin and crystal. You pause in the doorway, watching as servants rush by with trays of wine bowls of fruit and jars of powder. A wig falls from a cart. Someone curses. The wig is scooped up, dusted off, and replaced atop a fresh box. It will be worn within the hour. And you step back inside. Not because you want to, but because it's the only place you belong now. Versailles has shaped you, worn you down, softened your objections. You've stopped wishing for a bath. You've stopped expecting clean water. You've even stopped noticing your own smell. Because to survive Versailles, you have to surrender. Not all at once, but slowly, like powder settling into the folds of your skin. The night unfolds like a painting, every stroke deliberate, every color chosen to deceive. The chandeliers blaze, the harpsichord hums, and the corridors swell with candlelight and courtly laughter. You are once again in the midst of it all, swept into a masquerade where everyone knows the steps, even if their feet bleed beneath satin slippers. You step into the Salon de Venus, where a reception is underway. The room pulses with movement, fans flutter like wings, powdered wigs nod in rhythm to a string quartet, and servants glide like ghosts bearing silver trays. You move slowly through the crowd, and now the scents speak to you more clearly than words. You smell a story on every person you pass. A duchess smells of crushed violets and scorched hair powder. Her gown is exquisite, but the sweat stains beneath her arms darken the embroidery. A marquis wears a coat of clove and wine, but underneath his breath carries the distinct sharpness of decay. His gums are receding, his smile too careful. A lady's wrist is wrapped in a silk ribbon dabbed with oil of rose and amber. Her skin beneath it is blistering, rubbed raw by jewelry worn too tightly and washed too rarely. And you, what of you now? You realize with a start that you can no longer detect your own smell. It has blended into the wallpaper of Versailles. Whatever scent once defined you has been overwritten by smoke, musk, damp linen, and fatigue. You are no longer a visitor here. You are part of the palace's exhale. You find yourself drawn to a quieter room, one of the lesser salons used for chess and subdued conversation. It's less crowded, the lighting softer. A lady dozes near the window, her wig tipped slightly to one side. Her mouth falls open gently, revealing teeth blackened at the base. No one stirs her. A nobleman at the far end of the room lifts his coat and scratches his side with visible relief. You hear the rasp of fingernails on skin. He does not apologize. He merely straightens his cuffs and resumes his game. You slip into a chair, its cushion warm from the last occupant. You don't question it anymore. You no longer flinch. The wood is sticky at the edges, and your palm picks up a smear of old wax or hair pomade. You wipe it on your sleeve without thinking. That you realize is the final lesson of Versailles. You stop resisting. It's not a choice, but a slow erosion. Each day you allow one more thing to slide. You stop requesting fresh water. You stop avoiding the corners. You stop asking when the linens were last laundered. You start powdering your cuffs, freshening your wig, arranging your kerchief, just so, playing your part in the grand illusion. Even sickness becomes performance. A courtier with a limp disguises it as a fashionable stoop. A lady with pox scars wears larger beauty patches. The queen is rumored to faint often, but only in her bedchamber, never in public. You recall a story someone whispered near the stables that a nobleman died in his sleep. But his body was dressed powdered and sat in his chair for an entire morning before anyone was allowed to speak of it. It wouldn't do to interrupt the court's routine. Even death here must wait its turn. You rise again and return to the hall. Supper is being cleared, and the scent of congealed meat, soured wine, and sticky candied nuts hangs in the air like smoke. A dog whines near the corner, licking at the hem of a noble's robe. No one notices. In the corridor, a maid rushes past, carrying a basket of soiled garments. She's weeping quietly. A mistress struck her for delivering linen still stained. You think of that linen, that impossible task. How many times must it be aired, perfumed, pressed, and folded before its sin is erased? How many times must someone scrub a mark before it's accepted as clean? You follow her for a moment, not out of pity, but because her path is familiar. Down a back stair, through a narrow hall, to the room where the palace hides its waste. The smell rises in waves, feces, urine, sweat, sour milk, smoke. This is Versailles, too. Perhaps it is Versailles most of all. The maid leaves her basket beside a pile of others and disappears into the shadows. You stay a moment longer. You look at the piles, corsets damp with effort, gowns streaked with makeup, and human scent cravats stiff with spittle. Nothing's thrown away. Everything is recycled, masked, made to serve again. Because to cleanse, truly cleanse, would mean to acknowledge the filth. And Versailles cannot do that. You return upstairs one final time tonight, passing through a gallery where fresh candles are being lit. A servant struggles with the ladder. Wax drips onto the floor, forming a new mark that will be powdered over tomorrow. You walk past it. You walk past everything now, because you too are Versailles. Night has fully swallowed the palace now. The stars outside flicker weakly against the thick glass panes, their cold light no match for the warm, flickering blaze of candle chandeliers and torches lining the vast halls. Versailles continues its nocturnal opera, quieter, slower, but never silent, and never clean. You move through the now shadowed corridors, no longer seeking anything in particular. You know this place too well. The scent of damp stone and burnt tallow wax is your compass. The low murmur of servants still clearing supper dishes is your background music. The faint creak of mattresses being turned and the rustle of wigs removed mark the rhythm of the palace's evening routine. You pass a valet shaving by candlelight, his razor dull, the basin before him cloudy. He dips the blade again, scrapes it across his master's stubble, and mutters about the rash it always causes. But no one will notice. A little powder tomorrow will cover it. Everything is coverable, even pain. In one of the antechambers, a group of courtiers doze in their chairs. They haven't returned to their rooms yet. Their faces are slack, but still dusted in rouge. One snores faintly. Another clutches a wine glass long emptied. You study their bodies, the curled fingers, the swollen ankles, the dried sweat visible where collars loosened in exhaustion. Their powdered perfection is cracking, but they sleep through it, worn down by the weight of performance. You turn into the Queen's Gallery, where the scent of lavender and sandalwood lingers like perfume on an old letter. The drapes are drawn, the windows slightly ajar. Cool air seeps in, cutting through the haze but not banishing it. Nothing ever leaves Versailles. Not really. It just settles, waits and returns, with the next candle, the next wig, the next day. You approach a side table near the gallery's edge. A small mirror rests atop it, tilted slightly, its surface dulled with age. You look into it. And there you are. Your face powdered, though not freshly. Your collar faintly yellowed. A trace of sweat at your temple streaking your cheek with a line of exposed skin. You lean closer. Your reflection is no longer surprised by what it sees. It accepts. It adapts. You remember how you felt when you arrived, disoriented, horrified, incredulous. The first breath of Versailles nearly sent you reeling. The powder, the perfume, the rot beneath satin layers. It felt unlivable. Now it simply feels familiar. Because Versailles does not force your submission. It seeps into your skin, your clothes, your thoughts. It teaches you slowly. It rewards silence and punishes scrutiny. It makes you complicit. You exit the gallery and walk through the hall of mirrors one last time tonight. The candlelight dances in endless reflection. For a moment you can almost believe in the illusion again, the grandeur, the beauty, the myth of splendor unmarred by stink or stain. But you know too much now. You know that beneath each painted ceiling lies a floor where chamber pots overflow. You know that every curtained bed is full of lice. Every mirrored wall reflects decay dressed as elegance. You know that sickness is powdered sweat, is perfumed, and no one is truly clean. You pause beneath a gilded sconce, its candle guttering. The wax drips silently down the gold arm, forming a hard, crusted line. Just like the palace itself, hard, crusted, gleaming, and still it holds. Because Versailles is not about comfort. It's not about truth. It's about the maintenance of illusion. And now you are a part of it. Powdered, perfumed, and practiced. You return to your chamber. The bed is still warm, the sheets unchanged, the water in the basin untouched. You lie down in the same position as last night and the night before that. Your eyes close and the smell wraps around you like a familiar cloak. You dream of clean things, cold rivers, fresh sheets, linen that smells of sun. But even in dreams, you are still wearing your wig. Now that the lights are dimmed and the palace has finally gone quiet, you can rest your thoughts here. Let your breath slow like the flicker of a candle easing into its final glow. Feel the day fall away powder, and all as if you're laying aside the weight of a brocade coat, heavy perfumed and no longer needed. Whatever lingered, whether it was the clamor of courtly ritual or the scent of yesterday's wine, let it fade. You've made it through Versailles, and you no longer need to pretend. There's nothing to maintain, no one to impress, no one to notice if you finally exhale. So let the silence carry you now. Let the softness of darkness wrap around your limbs and sink into something more honest than any court chamber ever allowed. You're safe here. You're still. You're clean, if only in sleep.